Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of this epic Mormon Stories podcast interview. I'm John DeLynn. I'm here with Kara Burrell. Hey, Kara.
Hey. How you doing?
And we are doing part 3 of the Laing family, Kelly and Heather Laing. We did the first part with them, talking about their Mormon upbringing and their life in the military in the U.S. Navy, with Kelly commanding nuclear submarines. It's an amazing four-hour interview. You got to watch it. Then we had part 2 where we had Mason and Britton Laing talk about being raised Mormon, but also as being gay Mormons, and what that was like for them. Britton reaching the point of suicidality as a gay Mormon missionary. Mason as well, having suicidal ideation as a gay Mormon teen, and how they both came to terms with that, came out to their parents, and what that reception was like. You got to listen to part 2 and check that out. And what today, part 3, this final part is going to be about is to answer this question of how did, the son of a Orthodox Mormon seminary and institute teacher, Kelly's father, and the daughter of a, Orthodox Mormon family or a semi-Orthodox family growing up in Idaho Falls, what would cause these stalwart, featured in church news, featured in the Ensign kind of model Mormon couple, military couple, what would cause this amazing power couple, this amazing power family to lose their faith in and leave the Mormon church? And by the way, this has only happened in the past 12 months. So it's all super fresh. And, people deserve to know, why would such an amazing Mormon family ever lose their faith and leave the church? And that's what part 3 is going to be about. So welcome back,
Hello.
Kelly and Heather.
Thank you, John.
Yes, thank you.
It's a pleasure to be back. And
What's it like to hear your sons?
Yes, and that's actually what I want to start off with, is just thank you for that opportunity to sit there and listen to our sons tell their story from their perspective to somebody else. Brought incredible perspective to us. And that was a gift that no one else could give us. So thank you, John. I think we need to jump back into the point where we started to find out about Britton. So we had moved out to Annapolis, Maryland, crazy busy career. We had gone through so many things in our lives and just a lot of trials with the church. I will just actually backstep a little bit, where back in 2008, I was serving in a bishopric where no fault of the bishop himself, he got very ill due to shingles. And due to some bad medication and bad treatments by several doctors, he ended up having some psychotropic effects and things that affected his brain to where he, I believe, truly went insane. That was not caught in time, and it ended up costing him to where he went literally crazy. While he was bishop, I tried getting help from the stake president from the Area 70, was not getting the help I needed. I finally had to report him at work because he worked with me due to security clearances.
So you're in a bishopric.
Yes.
And your bishop's going mad.
Yes. And he's taking temple recommends away from good, faithful members. He's destroying this ward. He's accusing people of things that really aren't happening. Some pretty horrendous things.
And are you telling this in the context of kind of cracks beginning to develop in yourself?
Yes.
Is that...
And the whole reason I tell this, and this story itself would actually take a couple hours, and it's not the place here. And I also want to protect his widow, and that's the point is, he ended up getting to a point where, as bishop, he committed suicide.
He died by suicide as a Mormon bishop.
Yes.
And you were his counselor.
Yes. And I was carrying the ward for about 6 months before he did that, working with the stake president, working with the area authority. And that crushed me because the things that he was doing while he was still bishop, we didn't know all the ins and outs of his medical condition at the time. But the whole paradigm of the church will never lead you astray. The leaders will never lead you astray.
Or that they're inspired.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And the stuff that was going on was not inspired. And he actually stepped out and committed adultery before he committed suicide. And I don't believe it was because it was himself. That story is very long and it's very nasty, it's muddied and it's bad, but that cracked my shelf a little bit to where I realized at that time, in previous episodes of Mormon Stories, you've talked about there's the utility of the church and then there's the validity of the church. I started to have my cracks with the utility because I was getting overworked with the church. And that was also crack on the validity piece.
And that made you ask what kind of questions in your mind?
Are is everything that comes from the brethren and from leaders inspired of God? I also started to see inside of his inner workings where he was questioning members as far as, are they truly paying enough tithing? And he'd have me go through records and see what they paid in tithing compared to
what you imagine their income might be.
And what their income might be, which I thought was not right at all. And that's not been the case with the other bishopric I was in, but that was one data point for me. And then throughout the years, we've had other cases with leadership where some of the things that they've said or done just really made you go, that just doesn't seem right. And so I started to question, well, is everything really inspired of the Lord? I became an apologist as a ward mission leader for many people that were struggling with their faiths throughout the years. And I would start to put little things up on the shelf and try to be able to explain how it is, why it is that things would happen in the church. But I always justified for myself that no matter what, you stay, you pray, you pay, you just don't give up the ship. You don't get out of the boat. The boat's going in the right direction. Stay in the good ship Zion. And so regardless of the utility piece and Heather knows this, I was always called with some calling where I was always out all Sunday doing the church work. And it became exhausting. And Sundays became just not a day of rest for me. And it wasn't really a day of rest for her either.
No.
And so with all of that, I get to the point of, through my executive officer tour and commanding officer tour, and then get to the academy, I am exhausted. I'm now first counselor in the bishopric again.
You're probably wondering why they called you, right?
I did.
Yeah, that was definitely.
You want to talk about that?
When I got there, I had a first interview with the bishop. I said, look, I'm going to be so incredibly busy with this job. If you're going to give me a calling, I just ask that it's a calling that happens on Sundays, a lesson I teach.
Because you're working for the U.S. Naval Academy, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. And that was a job that was not just 8 to 5 or 7 to 5. It was Saturday, Sundays, nights, weekends, everything you could imagine, the requirements that were placed upon me. And so a few months after I got there, I got a calling from the executive secretary for the stake president. And he called me in and said, hey, stake president would like to meet with you. So I went in, we sat down, and he said, the Lord has inspired me to call you as first counselor in the bishopric in the Annapolis ward. And John, I had been fasting and praying up to that point, please God, I need relief. I can't do this. I was so overwhelmed with the job at the time. And the answer that came was, you need to do more. From basically the church, this calling came. And so that was not the answer I expected, but I said, I'm going to do it. Follow the brethren.
And I think too, like we've been told, you get blessings from serving. You get blessings.
Yeah.
So our hope, right, was that, all right, this must be the answer. We're going to get some amazing blessing to be able, stamina or whatever, to get through this and to do it.
The Lord would never give you a challenge you couldn't.
Right.
And there's that saying, whom the Lord calls, the Lord qualifies.
Exactly.
So there's all these Mormon sayings that do thought stopping because your brain and your soul is saying, I can't do any more.
Right.
Yep.
So there's these pithy aphorisms that stop your thoughts and say, nope, keep giving, keep pushing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the truth of the matter is the church will suck as much time, talents, and energies out of you as you will possibly give. That's the truth of the matter. I did not realize that at the time. I just thought the Lord will keep calling. So I accepted the call. And I went, and I did, and I worked, and I served, and I gave at the expense of my mental health, at the expense of our family's health, because I was giving all my time to the midshipmen, my job, and all my time to the church. And that left no time for me or my family. And that was a tough year. And that was a tough year. Mason and Ashley were going through an incredibly tough time at a horrible high school. And we kept praying, please, 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 help us. The bishop I served with, I love him still to this day. But he also experienced some illness, and I won't disclose his medical conditions, but it took him out for about 4 months, beginning in the fall of 2019, which left me once again leading the ward as first counselor while he was away from trying to get better. I was overwhelmed, to say the least, trying to run everything, not getting the help that I needed. And it was a ward that had a lot of challenges. The midshipmen were great. But then also at the time, we went from having just a few midshipmen when we arrived at Annapolis to having now these 40 to 50 midshipmen that were constantly coming. And we were having baptisms of other midshipmen. And the missionary work was going great. And the stake president felt inspired that we also need to establish a midshipman branch. And so I went through and helped with that establishment.
So create a new branch.
Yes. And the decision came, I thought I was going to get called to the midshipman branch because that would be the natural, hey, that's part of his job. He's going to always be there. He can work with him. It will take the pressures away off the family ward. But the answer is the bishop needed me, and he wasn't well yet, so they left me as first counselor in the Annapolis ward while they organized the branch. And realistically, I was still between the two because the midshipmen would still all come to me, the LDS midshipmen. It only increased the workload. And then as I mentioned in the last interview, I get to the point I am just physically and mentally tired. I'm going to pause there because I need to back up with Britton's story because this is key. It was over a year earlier. I was sitting at a parade on the field ground, and I actually had the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral John Richardson, sitting next to me. He's actually a good friend of mine.
It's kind of a big deal.
He is a big deal. And I served with his son on a couple occasions. And Admiral Richardson, he's now retired. I tell you, phenomenal man. And I never answer a phone. I mean, military protocols. I'm sitting next to a 4-star admiral, pretty much. And I get a phone call. And
I went and took it because I was next to you.
Yep.
And it was a call. I saw it said Brazil on it. And I was like, oh, I knew somebody there. So I ran. I just quietly kind of walked out. The full parade was in front of us. And I'm like, I got to take this one. And I went behind the tent where we were all sitting. And I took it. And it was Britain's mission president. And he talked to me in his pretty broken English. He did pretty good and talked to me and said that he was about Britton. He was safe. He was there, but he needed to talk to Kelly and I. And so we set up a time a couple hours later to talk to him. And so finished the parade wondering what's going on. And then
I stepped away for a little bit and we had that phone call scheduled.
Right.
Came back. And when we talked to the mission president, I spoke to him in Portuguese because I still speak fluent Portuguese. And he said, your son is the most dedicated, honorable, hardworking, serving missionary I've had. He's experiencing some extreme depression and needs to come home. That's all he told me. And he put Britton on the phone. He didn't tell me that Britton was gay. He didn't tell me that Britton was suicidal. He didn't tell me any of those other details. And he put Britton on the phone. And Britton cried and told me how bad he was struggling just with depression. And I said, Britton, come home.
Now, your Mormon upbringing, like your dad,
right?
Yeah, I could imagine what your dad would have said if he had received that phone call. And you told us that story of what your dad felt about your brother. Mm-hmm. So, like, did the thoughts of your dad echo through your mind, or the opposite?
Oh my God, I was living that experience all over in my head. From that experience with my brother and my dad, Heather and I, when we got married, that was one of the things we talked about early on. Is no matter what happens with our children. No matter what, there's always a place for them in our home, in our hearts, in our lives, and we'll never turn them away because that one hurt too much. And, it's interesting as, I hear my sons talk about my militaristic characteristic. And as I really tried to tone down what I grew up with, and I thought I did so much better. And I think I did do better. But even then, I didn't quite fix everything I should have. But I'm working on it still. And so for me, it was a huge win to be able to say to my son, come home. We welcome you back no matter what. And we didn't tell anybody in the ward that he was coming back early. We just celebrated him coming home. And he was welcomed with open arms. And that reunion at the airport was very warm and kind and loving.
I was excited.
You were glad he was home.
I was really glad.
You wanted your boy back.
I was crying because I was kind of happy he was coming home, to tell you the honest truth.
Did part of you have to fight disappointment, Carrie? The Mormon brain.
The Mormon brain fighted the disappointment, but I pushed that off because I told myself, like my son said, I'm very quick about when I make an adjustment in my mind, I'm going to take it on, I'm going to move with it. And so I pushed that off and said, no, my son served his best. He served an honorable mission. And whether it was only a year or 2 months or 2 years, it was an honorable mission.
And I think we love Britton, and I mean, we knew who he was to us. I know that he was suffering underneath, but we knew who he was, and that wasn't something he was going to take lightly. That wasn't going to be something. So it was very real, very important that he come home. Like, we took it very seriously that's where he's coming, and knew that he said that to us, he needs to be home with us. Absolutely.
Because he was such a high performer.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was.
And just like Mason said,
question.
Britton was, of the four, we love all our children the same, but Britton was the easiest and the perfect child. You told him once.
He made it the easiest.
And he did it.
Which sometimes is not a good thing.
No,
for them,
no.
Right? Yeah.
But we didn't realize then what was going. Now we realize, but we didn't realize then what was going through his mind. And on top of that, when I realized hearing him tell his story about having his older brother go through that kidney transplant when Britton was 10 and Quincy was 12, and oh, by the way, the person that gave the kidney was this person, and then runs a half marathon 3 months later. But I mean, that is experience in
Heather gave her
itself.
kidney to her son.
Yeah.
She did. And
I'm his mom. I love him. So,
yeah, but I couldn't. I wasn't a match, and she was.
but you would have. So it doesn't.
It was. It's one thing to see the love of your life give life to your children once, but to do it twice. But then you realize there's always second and third order effects, which the other children experienced, and we weren't as attuned to.
No, I feel like sometimes, I mean, I think in everybody's life, there's just times when they're surviving. You're just holding on, and it's hard to reach out of yourself, and you're just doing all that you can to get through it. And definitely Quincy's transplant time was one of those times. So
It's kind of a blur at times.
yeah.
But so coming back, when Britton comes home from his mission, this perfect child I was not going to disregard, because growing up in my house, if you ever brought up the statement, Dad, I feel this way, I don't feel, or this is the way I'm feeling, the answer was, no, don't feel that way, change it. You're not allowed to feel that way. And so in our home, if our children said, I feel this way, we tried to listen and validate those feelings. So I wasn't going to push this away, especially knowing also my mom struggled with depression. So in my mind, I'd come to the realization that depression actually, it's not just, oh, I feel sad. There can be genetic things, and there are genetic tendencies that run in our family. And I was not going to have my son go through what my mom went through. So we brought him back, and we loved him. And we tried, and we searched, and we thought, what can we do to help you? And there were a lot of tough nights and a lot of tough days, and amongst all the work that was going on. And we got the counseling, I tried to get him to start to take some medicine.
At some point, did you realize there was suicidality once he got back? Did you realize how serious it was?
He had mentioned that there were thoughts that he had, but never truly disclosed everything. Because at the same time, he hadn't come out to us yet. So in my mind, it's just depression, but I never wanted it to go to suicidal ideations. We didn't know about the cutting. We didn't know about a lot of the things that were going on. But I knew that with a lot of people in my family, as soon as they were able to get on some medications to break them out of the cycle, they could start talking about what was going on. And so I tried convincing him to take some medication, and it took a little while. In fact, what it took was a seminal event. And it was a few months after he got back. And Heather was gone at a fireside with the younger two. And I had just gotten back from some church meetings. And I was standing in the kitchen on a Sunday night eating a cookie. Heather made me cookies often. And all of a sudden, I just had this sick feeling of, where's Britton? And John, if I still believe in God, and I still believe that night that I was told to go find my son. And I went and searched everywhere. And when I found Britton that night, that to me was one of the most life-changing moments in my life, finding your child, my child, in the process of taking his own life. I didn't know that he had other attempts or thoughts before and was going to in plans, but that was the night I woke up to it. And I held him and I cried with him. And it broke my heart to see this perfect child, the one that was always so happy-go-lucky, but I didn't know was struggling inside his entire life with this perfectionism that I passed on to him, got to the point that he was going to take his own life. And that broke me. It broke me as a father. It broke me as a human being, this person I love. How? Why? But that was the point that allowed us to start getting him some help. And that's what convinced him, I believe, to start taking some medication, which helped pull him up out of
I'm just as a mental health professional in training, you call 911 if somebody's suicidal, you get them help immediately. I'm just stunned that the mission president and his wife didn't maybe let you know the full extent of that,
right? So
that you could know the severity and begin treating him as soon as he gets home, with the treatment that was necessary. I'm just sad that it had to come to that.
And as somebody who's dealt with suicide with many service members throughout my career, I am too. I'm shocked and I'm dismayed by it too. And that comes back to Britton's point. These are good men and women that are called to callings, that are trying to do their best, but they're not trained. The church prides themselves in unpaid clergy. That unpaid clergy comes at a price. Well, they've got the money.
Oh, yeah, a couple $100 billion just sitting in stock market.
Yes.
You can afford some better training.
Exactly. Provide that training. Provide those resources. Save lives. And actually get people to mentally heal. And honestly, pay the clergy. They've got enough money to pay them for a couple 100 years without any more tithing. Let's do it. Let's do it right.
Yeah.
But I will say, coming back to that, it was a few months later that, Britton relayed this. He called us and said, hey, can we talk? And we went up.
Can I just ask you one question?
Please.
Sorry. So, of course, you can't judge someone's sexuality by their physical outward expressions and mannerisms and stereotypes.
Yep.
And, you might look at Britton and say, hey, maybe you would have some ideas that might be a possibility. So as his parents, had that thought ever occurred to you that he might be gay in any super meaningful way prior to him coming out?
Me, no.
How is that possible?
I really didn't.
I get that answer a lot.
I really didn't. It was just out of my. It was out of my paradigm.
Margie's shaking her head.
She's like, "Thank you, Margie." It was out of my paradigm. Just, I didn't think that it's bad, but just, I guess I always grew up if I do all these certain things just like I'm supposed to, if I pray hard enough, if I do this and this and check all these boxes, then I'm going to be blessed with everything turning out just the way it should.
Why would a loving Heavenly Father do that?
Right.
Especially if you're faithful,
I really thought that. And I had never really had, I guess Quincy. I didn't even look at Quincy's illness with his kidney stuff as one of those. I just okay, and we handled it. But I don't know. I really didn't. I didn't think of it that way.
Looking back, is that kind of amazing?
It is kind of. He didn't. I don't know. To me, he didn't.
I guess he was trying to cover it up.
Well, okay. So, and he has had lots of friends that were girls, right? And sometimes that is a thing, like how you said Britton, and he did that. But his older brother was also just like that. And Kelly's actually just like that. Kelly's friends were he had more friends that were girls than boys. So I'm trying to think of the signs to me, and maybe I'm just naive or I didn't know, but I really didn't think it.
Interesting.
Ever. I never thought it.
I think that goes back to what we were just saying, that there's generalities, but there's lots of straight men who also have, so it's there's never any certain flag that would completely be called on it, I guess.
You're absolutely right. And you talk about you look at the NFL, and they've done the studies in the NFL, the certain percentage of NFL players that are hyper masculine, that are gay, that will not come out in the open when they do the closed, surveys and stuff, but they actually come out in a survey where it's non-attribution that they're gay. There's all kinds of things about these super hyper masculine communities amongst the military. And it just is very pervasive in people that never show the classic tendencies or hand gestures or voice or speech recognition, whatever it may be, that would indicate that they're gay by what the tendencies of society are. So I I asked my son on a couple occasions, because he had a little bit of a lisp. But
He was so cute.
Oh, it's so cute. But he also was very focused on always being this perfectionist type. Back up a little bit. I have a brother. I mentioned him earlier. His name's Joe. And Joe he was, like I said, the jock, All-American football player, quarterback, played for a couple of colleges. He would have gone pro if he didn't damage his shoulder in college. The guy was just on fire. Amazing football player. And Joe talk about hyper masculine too. Like all the girls in school loved him. He had the dark hair and he had the looks. He had everything, just cut, ripped dude. And yet this hyper masculine dude that I would always joke around with about gay this, gay that growing up. And even in our adult years, when my oldest son's kidney transplant failed, the one that Heather gave him, 6 years after the transplant, I'm in command of my nuclear submarine. That kidney fails. I need another kidney for my son. I was going to give my kidney to another family. We were going to do the swap. And all of a sudden I find out I have damage to one of my kidneys. The person that steps up and gives my oldest son a kidney is my brother. And this guy he was already my best friend. We take brocations together. Our families do everything together. We're staying with him here this weekend. This guy I would do anything for, and he knows it. And I know he's obviously done that for me. I remember a text that I got one morning from him before that kidney transplant. And it was a picture that I still save in my phone of the Savior holding this man that's just crumpled over and slumped over and aching and crying. And he sends me this long text. He goes, Kelly, I don't know what to do. I'm broken. We just found out that my son's gay. My nephew. And they found out. Why? Because somebody in the ward found out that he was gay and went to the bishop and the stake president and they called him in and they revealed it to him that way. And then
He was outed.
He was outed. And then they restricted my nephew from the sacrament. They restricted him from getting his Eagle Scout. They restricted him from all kinds of things. He was branded. He had never acted on it. And it became this horrible situation. And they stayed in the church and they tried to stay faithful for so long on this. But having my nephew come out as gay kind of opened my eyes to things. And that's when I started asking my children. I did not tell them that my nephew was gay for the longest time. But I would ask him little questions here and there, including Britton. He remembers. That time in Hanama Bay, when I asked him, hey, do you like men? That's when it was just that I had found out about that one sailor. And so I was kind of curious. Is this something? And I also had noticed his eyes. He had just looked at a guy when there were lots of girls in bikinis walking around. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to notice the girls in bikinis, not the guy. So I had these, looking back, yeah, duh, I should have known. But I asked him and I trusted his statement, his honesty. But I also realize now there's some things people just aren't ready to share. And there's boundaries. And everybody deserves their boundaries. And the person who taught me about boundaries in life is my son named Britton. And that's this whole process. So fast forward that night, when we sit down and we start talking. And then he starts crying. And he cried and he cried. And he remembers it was 20, 25 minutes. To me, it sounded like 40 minutes. It was forever of just holding and trying to get him to speak. And I remember the statement he made was, Mom, Dad, I've never been attracted to girls.
Yep.
To me, that was a mic drop moment. And I'll let Heather tell what she felt in that moment. But I'll tell you this, John, if there's ever one moment in my life that I felt pure, unadulterated, godly love and acceptance for somebody, was in that moment. I felt love for a human being like I've never felt. I honestly felt true Christ-like love, godly love, agape love. And it was not even a question in my mind. And I remember saying, I love you, son. And no matter who you love, I will love. You'll always have a place in our heart, in our homes, in our lives.
The same thing. I guess to me, I know it's different for some people don't accept, but I just like, I was surprised, but I just knew. I'm like, okay, all right, that's fine. You can love whoever you want to. And I started maybe like thinking, what does this mean? But I'm like, it'll come, whatever. But I love you. And we just hugged and like, we're going to take the next day as it comes. But I was shocked, but not in a shock of like anger or anything like that. Of just,
how do we move forward
Britton.
from there? Yeah.
So
He's our son.
Britton's Britton.
I remember
Love him.
though, we talked for a couple hours and then we went to bed that night, but I didn't go to sleep.
Yeah.
I did not sleep an ounce that night. And all I could remember is that shifting from that intense moment of love, all of a sudden I started remembering everything the prophets had said, everything that was in for the strength of the youth, everything that was in the miracle of forgiveness, everything that was in all the pamphlets, the Boyd K. Packer talks, the Nellie Maxwell, the going back to the Kimball talks, going back to in the 50s, the 60s, all the shame and the blame on parents if their children are gay, that it was a choice, that it was never born this way. How could God ever make him this way, as Boyd K. Packer would say? And it went through my mind, and that entire night, you talk about torment. And Alma in the Book of Mormon, I was tormented for 3 days and 3 nights, whatever it was. I was tormented. That was my hell. If I'd ever been through hell, it was that night. Because I could not come to the fact that godly love I felt for my son, who I now knew if there's anybody in the world that could convince me it wasn't a choice, because up until that point, I still had in the back of my mind, it's still a choice. It's still, you can choose not to be gay. But if there was one person, and I told people this before I ever knew Britton was gay, if there was one person in my life that I ever thought could see God the Father and Jesus Christ as Joseph Smith did, it was Britton. That's how good he was growing up. And so getting to this point, and I realized Britton's not going to lie to me. This is not a choice. So if it's not a choice, what is it then? He's born this way, and I could not come to bridge that gap. And I texted the bishop that morning when I finally had to go to work. I said, I can no longer do this. I said, my son came out to me as gay last night. And I told him the story in text, a very long text. I said, I cannot serve as your counselor any longer because of the things that have been said and what I'm going through right now. I can no longer uphold the brethren for what they've said. And I need to get some peace and resolution. I need some answers. He was very loving and very kind in his response. He said, I understand. And there was more to it, but he was not judgmental. He was a good man. He really is. 2 days later, Britton and I are talking, and Britton comes to me and says, Dad, I can do this. I can get married to a woman. I can still stay in the church. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the hell can you do this? Because I'm thinking in my mind, if you told me that I had to marry a man to get to the celestial kingdom, I'm like, all right, hell it is. Like, there's not a chance. I mean, John, you're a good looking dude, but oh, hell no. That's the way I feel. And so, but that gave me faith. And I said, if Britton can do it, I can do it. If he's going to stay, I'm going to stay. And so I pushed through. And I pushed through for another year, serving, giving, working, doing everything I could, studying, trying to make peace, giving talks about how to stay in the boat, don't give up the ship, but never telling anybody the mental gymnastics I was doing. And at this point, I'm winning the gold. We get to January. My bishop is sick. I'm still carrying the ward. Get into February, my midshipman dies. COVID's starting to come down. I'm going through incredible pressures and stress, and I'm having some difficulty with a certain leader at the Naval Academy, and I won't name the name because for legal reasons. And that whole adage that God will never give you more than you can handle, at this point, I'm saying bullshit. Bullshit. I'm at my wit's end. And then I get that text from Mason.
That says?
Mom, Dad, I'm just like Britton. I'm gay too. And now my reaction is it's the very same thing. I feel that love for my son.
All right.
And now it's 2.
Now it's 2. And now I'm thinking in my head, and I at this point call my bishop and I said, I have done everything the church has ever asked for me. I've paid my 100% tithing the entire time. I've served with every calling. I've done the mission, you know, everything they ask, time, talents, everything in the temple as they talk about. I never say no. And then you look at the statements for the brother, and if your parents do everything they're supposed to, your children will turn out right. Family home evenings, family scripture study, family prayer. And yet I've got 2 sons now that are gay. What gives? Why? And I'm asking for answers, and they can't give me answers. And as I go forward asking for answers, I'm getting these platitudes. So they just need to pray, you know, basically pray away the gay. Just stay, just pray. Don't give up the faith. Stay in the boat. Be patient. God will make it right. You know, they just have to get, you know, stay strong in the next life. And I'm like, no. I said, I can't imagine being told that I had to live without love for this lifetime in hopes for the next. I said, do you realize what you're asking? And I saved the full context of this text, and it was a very long text to my bishop. I said, you are literally asking my sons to do what you and I couldn't. Could you, if I told you you had to go marry a man right now and sleep with him in order to make the celestial kingdom, would you do it? He goes, no, I couldn't. I said, how can you ask that of my sons? How fair is that? Did God really put us down here to do that? And what are the options for them? Well, they can serve in almost every capacity. No, they can't. Because if you looked at the doctrine of the church when it comes to gays, and you've already pretty much laid it out, you know, it's either you stay in the church and you marry somebody, or you stay in the church, you don't marry somebody, or you marry of the opposite sex, and you just hold on until the end. And if you do that, then you are hoping that you'll be changed in the afterlife, that you'll be fixed. Or you leave the church, or, as Mason pointed out, you leave life. One of those 4 options is really what you have to go through. And if you do stay in the church long enough, what your hope is you're hoping to stay and get fixed in this next life and be giving somebody of the opposite sex that also was not worthy, or whatever excuse the church wants to give, was not able to get married in this life. So you waited this entire life hoping for love, companionship, and were never given that. And that's the best you're going to hope for. But yet the church also has this caveat. The desires that you have in this life will be raised into the eternities. Oh, they desire to be gay. Oh, no, actually, they're born this way. But with the church's teachings, those desires will always be there. So you're telling me now it's one or the other, but their doctrine conflicts like so many other doctrines. My sons are gay. And as I started to engage with my father and others trying to get help and answers, I talked to my father about this, and it poured in my heart. This was my just absolute breaking moment, needing help. My father came back with the basic, Kelly, we don't understand why people are born with this, but it's a choice. You know, it's no different than my desire to look at porn or smoke or drink. And I got angry. I got really angry. No, Dad, it is not the case. They did not choose this, and it's not the same as wanting to look at porn. It's not the same as wanting to smoke. I said, Dad, do you realize? I said, you got married and you had a wonderful relationship with my mom your entire life until she died from cancer when I was serving as an XO. She died from pancreatic cancer. I said, but when Mom died, now I'm going to really reveal to you how fucked up our family is. And yes, I'm going to use that term. I told him, I said, Dad, 2 weeks after Mom died, you were engaged to your therapist that was my age. How is it that you think, for some weird reason, my sons can go with a life without love, companionship, but you can't stand to go 2 weeks without companionship? You're engaged to your therapist. Oh, by the way, the ethical things on that one side too. And the conversation went south from there. But I said, Dad, this is absolutely jacked up.
He couldn't last 2 weeks.
He couldn't last 2 weeks. He didn't end up marrying her, fortunately, because all the children intervened and like, this is wrong. And they finally broke it off. But after breaking it off, I kid you not, less than 7 days later, he's engaged to another woman. He's now married to her. They've served 3 missions together. And she's good for him. And she's a nice woman. But I reiterated with him, you could not be alone. It drives you nuts. Dad, all I wanted in life as a teenager was acceptance and truly to be loved by somebody that loved me as much as I love them. You understand that, and I know you have that. You expect a life of celibacy and loneliness out of my sons. How is that fair? Is God so cruel that he would create a very large percentage of the population to be like this? And the basic answers I got were, Kelly, you're treading on dangerous water. The brethren have made the doctrine clear. Don't criticize the brethren. Don't go against the brethren. And it went south even from farther. We went back and forth. But at the end of the day, I was told, just stay, pray away the gay, don't act on the gay, stay in the boat, which it wasn't right. And as I asked those questions of stake presidents and others, nobody could give me answers. Now, we did get a lot of harsh answers from a lot of different leaders. To the credit of the Mormon Church, there's two men that I would like to cite as phenomenal in this. Coach Ken Niumatalolo, or I should say President Niumatalolo. And Ken, sometime I hope you hear this. I was treated with absolute love and dignity. He couldn't explain why it was. He says, Kelly, I don't know. But he was kind. And when we were going through all of this faith crisis, as some people call it, and I actually call it a crisis of truth, and I'll get to that in a little bit. I had one stake president, and I'm going to say his name, Steve Hawes. When I was in the depth of my despair, after Heather had left Annapolis to move back to Washington, trying to figure this whole mess out, I get a call from Steve Hawes. And we were friends before. He's stake president in Washington now. We were friends before we moved from Washington back to Maryland. I get a call from Steve knowing that I'm struggling. And he calls me and says, Kelly, hey, I'm going to be in DC. Can we have dinner Saturday night? I'm in the middle of some tough things at the time. And I said, yeah, Steve, I think I can make you time. He flies out to whatever function he's going to. We get together Saturday night. We sit and we talk. We went from 6 o'clock that night, had dinner on the wing wall in Annapolis, went and sat on the wall at the academy till it was about 1 a.m. talking. And he listened to all my concerns. He listened to me. He couldn't explain everything away, but he listened and he was kind. And he said, no matter what, Kelly, you're my friend. I said, Steve, you probably got a big function tomorrow, because he had just flown out that day. He goes, oh no, I'm flying back tomorrow. Well, today. I'm like, wait, why did you come to DC then? What kind of a man flies cross country just to have dinner with a friend and sit with him? That's the kind of man Steve Hawes is. There are great people inside the church. Unfortunately, they don't know the whole truth. And this comes to the informed consent, John. Because when I was going through this and I was not getting answers on how it is my children fit into the plan of salvation, my children's courage allowed me to take the blinders off and start looking elsewhere for answers, because I needed answers for them. I need to understand this LGBTQ thing. As somebody who grew up very homophobic, I needed to find out why, how, what to do, how to help them. And as I started looking for answers the church couldn't give and wouldn't give, I looked outside the church and I started finding the answers I needed. Answers that actually explain things away. And there's some incredible TED Talks out there, including yours and others. And there's a lot of resources out there that are helping me understand the science behind it, but also even more so how to embrace it and to love people because of it. And I started to become an ally. But as I started to look, I started to find out, well, how my kids still don't fit in the plan of salvation. As I started to look into things, and having that dissonance between what the church preached and what my sons were, I couldn't make reason of it. And I went out to the beach one day on a Saturday just to think. And I couldn't, dying inside, mentally. And on the way back, I remember thinking about Jerry and Julie Johnson. They left the church. Why did they leave the church? I didn't understand fully. And so I Googled it because I knew they did some sort of story about it. And And lo and behold, this thing called Mormon Stories pops up. In the 2-hour drive back, I started to listen to their multi-hour episode. And I listened to it all the way up on the way beach back. About 2 hours into it, I stopped the episode and I said, I got to call Jerry. And I called him. I still had his number.
Now, you had known earlier, right?
That they left the church.
And maybe you'd even known that they had done an interview.
They did.
But
not with who or not what or how.
But you didn't watch or listen then, right? Why not?
Because it's anti-Mormon. Because, of course, they wanted to leave the church because, Julie and Jerry are very smart people, and they probably thought themselves out of the church. Or there's all kinds of excuses.
Prideful, yeah.
But these were, regardless, they were still our friends.
Yeah.
And if anybody ever knows that Jerry and Jerry Johnson, some of the finest people you ever meet in life. But as I listened to their story and they started to talk about why, and Jerry had no intention of leaving, and their story is epic. They started talking about the true history of the church and what was going on. I said, whoa, what is the CES letter? And so I got back. I read that entire letter that night. I sent it to Heather. I dove into other things.
Was after you talked with Jerry?
Yeah.
You talked to Jerry first?
Yes.
What'd you ask Jerry?
I asked him why. What was it? And he actually recommended, Kelly, you need to jump into the true history of the church. Allow yourself to look even deeper and question without somebody saying, no, you can't, and it's just anti-Mormon literature. He goes, you'll be surprised. Don't let me convince you of anything, but you need to do your own research. Jerry is one that's very much of informed consent, and make sure that you are a critical thinker. Read everything you can on every side of the aisle and make your own decisions. He wouldn't tell me you need to leave the church. In fact, that wasn't his goal. He said, just, hey, this is what happened with me. Listen to the rest of the Mormon story, and I did. And as I started to read that CES letter, my mind was blown. And that started this last year where I think I've got a master's or a doctorate in church history and study.
Do you want to just list, this is something I always have people do because there's always going to be people listening for the first time that have never read the CES letter and have no idea what we're talking about. If you had to list 5 or 10 of the issues that you learned through the CES letter, through Mormon stories, do you want to just kind of...
No, spend as much time as possible.
Yeah.
What did your master's degree
You're not
teach
talking
you
like
that?
5 or 555.
No. Just 500.
I'm very passionate about this, as you can tell, because I was so in as the apologist for the church. I could explain away
your mission, right?
It was. I could explain away the polygamy. I could explain away Joseph Smith Gold Digger. I could explain away fill in the blank. But then as I started to read the CS letter and reading about the Book of Mormon. Okay, so my testimony was not in Joseph Smith. My testimony was in the Book of Mormon. I was just finishing it for the 40th time. And so at the same time, I'm starting to read the CES letter. And as I'm reading this together, and I start to realize, the view of the Hebrews, the Great War, and all the other books that influenced the Book of Mormon, and that, oh my gosh, the parallels between all this. And then there's another great study that talks about having worked at the Naval Academy, we plagiarize check every paper that's turned in. A midshipman does not get away with plagiarism. And we've caught some in the past, and because we do not take cheating lightly. But if you put the Book of Mormon into a plagiarism algorithm, holy shit. What it comes up with, it is guaranteed that it was plagiarized between several books. Even if it's not the exact words, the fact that there's so many exact storylines that are from other books in there. And the fact that, 20% of the Book of Mormon comes right out of a King James Bible that has all the errors and of the Bible his family had, and also what monks and Catholic priests put into that Bible he had. The italicized things made it into the Book of Mormon. Nobody can explain it that way, as much as the apologists want to. And then on top of that, every prophecy that's in the Book of Mormon, Columbus, the Americas, Joseph, this prophet Joseph being named after his father, all the prophecies of the Book of Mormon mysteriously stop right after Joseph Smith's death, or, when he actually translates the Book of Mormon. Weird. The 19th century Protestant gospel is in the Book of Mormon. Everything that's in there. The language.
With Native Americans.
The Native Americans.
Before Jesus is born, right?
Yes. And then the thing I never heard about that just blew my doors off, the anachronisms. as a scientifically minded guy, when it realized, oh my gosh, the horses, why did I know this? Horses were not in the Americas until the conquistadors. So, there were thousands of years back, but
over 10,000.
Yeah.
All the anachronisms.
The anachronisms, all the horses, no coins, steel. Oh my, how could I be so stupid? The sheep, wheat, and the list goes on. And there's dozens of anachronisms. And I love how the apologists try to paint in the tap ears and other things that come into it. But when I started to see the anachronisms, I thought, holy crap. And then reading about Captain Kidd's stories, all right? Now, as a sailor, this is the part that really made me mad. Oh, yeah. I knew about Captain Kidd. I knew who he was. I knew his history. And I didn't know that Joseph Smith knew about Captain Kidd. But to find out about, this gold digging, that when I heard gold digging, I was thinking, yeah, he got gold plates. But the fact that this rock in the hat thing, I was like, no way. There's no way that he translated the Book of Mormon using the rock in the hat.
Where the plates weren't in the room.
Yeah, or that they weren't in the room. That was later on that I found that out. Finding out the fact that, and especially with Captain Kidd. Okay, so Captain Kidd had all these exploits and was pirates, and yes, he did bury treasures in New England areas, and some of them were found, and hence why there was all the gold digging and the treasure digs that were going on, and Joseph Smith's family got pulled into. And for those that don't know, please look into that. That is mind blowing, and there's so much documentation on it. But the church kind of waves a glossy hand over it like it's nothing. But then Captain Kidd, he would stop off in a couple ports that are on just near Madagascar, off the eastern side of Africa. And one of the ports is in an island called the Comoros Islands. Well, the funny thing about it is, yes, those old maps, it was Comora. Not today, the Comoros Islands. It was Comora.
And the capital city?
And the capital city, Moroni. And down in my office, from a map from 1972, I have a world map because of all the strategic stuff that we do. But this is a kind of a legacy map we have up. Sitting right in front of me is the island, the Comora Island, and Moroni, the capital. And it just makes me mad because I sat there and I went, I'm a dumb you-know-what. I felt like the sucker. Those old Disney cartoons where the donkey, you're like, I'm a jackass. How did I believe this?
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Please.
You were a commanding officer of several nuclear submarines who read the Book of Mormon 40 times. How did you make sense of the Jaredite submarines?
That's a great question. Tell us, give us 2 minutes on this, on the barges, tight as a dish.
Kara?
Could
I mean, I love you.
Oh, yes.
If we're going to talk dumb things, the Comoros Islands, that would go over my head.
There's this big I believe button. I'm going to push this, I believe, because it's complete and total bullshit. Because you think about it, like
the Jaredite barges. Give us submarine 101.
These two bowls that are tight as ship. That you have a hole in the top and a hole in the bottom, and you could have
with like a corkscrew.
And you have all these animals, and you're getting tossed and turns in the waves, and people are saving lives. Do you think about all the shit from those animals that's getting tossed around and back and forth? And I completely.
But could they be submerged?
Yep. And
without metal, right?
Without metal.
They left the Tower of Babel.
Yes. And
to go build those. So we're talking ancient.
What it takes is a nuclear submarine to make your own oxygen, to make your own water, and that they were on the ocean for this long.
Plus, how they feed all the animals.
Yes. In my mind, I'm just thinking.
And breathe. How'd they breathe?
God made it happen.
How they see light.
Right. God made it happen.
God just miraculously made it happen. But then, as I'm continuing to read on and I get into deeper study about Noah, I'm like, oh, duh.
Oh, right.
Like the number of animals, when you actually do the analysis on what it would take to actually build an ark to hold everything, when you start really looking at the scientific matter and realizing, how could I have been so stupid?
Because you are 2 master's degrees, right? You kind of were a lazy learner.
It was a lazy learner. And that's when I got into the anger stages, John. I really did. And I'll save that for later. But the big breaking point for me was the Book of Mormon. But then I get to the Book of Abraham. I had never heard about the fact that those scrolls even still existed. And the church is whitewashing and moving of the goalposts from translation to inspired by. Give me a fucking break, Mormon church. Yes, I'm angry about it. My wife's pushing me. It made me so mad. The anger kicked in. Like, how? How? A logical man can look at that and the apologists try to wave it away. How, you guys? It doesn't make any sense. Even the drawings you brought in, you use in the book of Abraham, you actually reference those drawings. And you say it was translated by the book of Abraham. And those scrolls were funeral papyri. And they were actually written in at best, the 2nd century BC. At best, not 1,500 to 2,000 years BC. And there's nothing in there about Abraham.
Not even his name.
Not even his name. And then the Kinderhook plates. The Kinderhook plates just absolutely blew my doors off too.
Which is?
These are plates that were found, that were brought to Joseph Smith out of this Indian mound. He said, look what we found. And he looked at these and said, oh, these are the writings of this great prophet. I'm forgetting right now.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And I will translate these at a future date, but these are, just this miraculous writings. And the church tries to explain that, well, somebody wrote that down and says that Joseph Smith said that.
But in reality, the plates were what?
The plates were absolutely fake. And they were falsified in a blacksmith shop in the 1800s. Intentionally to prove that Joseph Smith was a liar. And oh, by the way, the church said that these plates were going to be translated at some future date until 1980, when it was scientifically proven that they were actually forged in a blacksmith shop. When the metallurgy and the microscopes and everything else, they could actually prove that, yep, the chemicals that were used in the 1800s to do the scribing and the inscription actually came from the 1800s. And the church finally came back and said, yep, they were false. But they didn't ever go back and apologize, like the church never does. They never apologize. They never actually say they were wrong. They just disavow things. But those were my top 3 shelf breakers. The 4th, polyandry. I did not know about the polyandry.
Which is?
Joseph Smith marrying other men's wives. Yeah. That one angered me to no end. Why does he need to do that? And why is it that these prophet, seers, and revelators have never prophet, seered, and revelated themselves out of that one? How come they haven't explained that one? Oh, but then we have the gospel topic essays that kind of gives us a little hand wave. No. Those gospel topic essays have no date on them. They keep revising them. They're not signed by any prophet or apostle. They hide them inside the church website. They take them up, they put them down, whatever it may be. And guess what? They never truly explain polyandry. It's never in the scriptures. What justifies Joseph Smith to take another man's wife and marry her without his knowledge after sending him on a mission? And for people that say that he didn't have sex with them, wake up. Wake up. The man groomed 12-year-old girls.
14.
Well, there's actually,
okay.
Yeah, he groomed the 12-year-old and as to become a polyandrous wife.
Oh, okay.
Mary Elizabeth
Leitner.
Thank you very much. Mary Elizabeth Leitner. He groomed her from the age of 12, told her that she was to be his wife. And later on, after she was already married, made her his wife. Why? The 14-year-old. Oh, I'm sorry, a few months shy of 15. When I heard that, give me a break. And I read all of the church essays over and over, highlighted them, went back and forth. But honestly, those were my top 5 right there. When I got to that point, I called Heather. And I said, Heather, and I sent her the CES letter. I said, I love you no matter what. I want you to know my love's deeper for you than anything ever. And I never want to disappoint you, but I'm going to tell you something that's going to hurt you. It's going to shock you. But I need to be open and clear with you on this one. And I'm going to use profanity because that's what I use at night. And I didn't swear before that. No. And it does feel good to swear now. But I called her and I said, Heather, we've been duped. We've been fucking duped. And I said, I can no longer stay in the church. And I made the decision. I was done. I'd already taken my garments off. I was still a counselor in the bishopric. That was it. And so...
And how long ago was that?
That was
a year ago.
June of last year.
Yeah, that's true, a year.
And I came out to my family in July. My brothers and sisters, my father. So I'll let you pick up from where I sent you that CES letter and your feelings. Because I was very passionate about it.
I'm going to go back to after Mason texted us and Mason, I'd have to say I did kind of have an inkling about Mason.
Yes.
Just a little
You what?
bit.
You had what?
I did kind of have an inkling about Mason.
What?
being gay because, you
Cut to
know,
Mason with 2 scrunchies in his hair right now, looking adorable AF.
just so cute.
To be fair, though, in the last year plus, he has become a more flamboyant. True? All right.
He's letting his true self out.
When you don't have to pass. And
Exactly.
you're not trying
He
to
can
suppress
just-
yourself.
He can just be him. I definitely was like, okay, we can take this too. All right, okay. But Kelly too. I was upset, but Kelly's just very passionate, and he's very like the injustice of things. I can be like, okay, and I can think of things, but he's more tender than I am. I have to tell everybody too, and has more heart, and so it just crushed him. Absolutely, it did me, but I was just definitely not as vocal or like, okay, we're going to figure it out, and I can shove things way down better than he can too. And he went on this journey to do it, and I just kept telling myself, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll all work itself out. Whatever happens, it'll be fine. And I did. I kept just telling, it'll be fine. I told myself that. And I was also just like trying to like get through the days and living life. And Britton was going through his struggles too. And we were chatting and figuring things out and stuff too in life. And then, so go bound to, we left. So I didn't leave Kelly. I went to help us get moved to Washington, and Kelly had to stay in Annapolis for his job. He had to stay there until September. And so we left, and we were in Idaho, and that's when he called me and he told me that. And I'm trying to think of my feelings. Like I said, I promptly forget bad feelings usually because I don't like them. And so, but I did. I wasn't shocked. I knew where he was, but I'm like, there has to be something big because this is not something he takes lightly. This is big. And so I'm like, okay, I will read this. And he's like, okay. And I knew I had no worries about him leaving me or no worries about him. I knew he'd be there. I knew that we would be together. I just knew that. And I was okay with that as long as that part. And so I took the next couple nights. It was just me. Ashley and I were sharing, my daughter Ashley and I were sharing a bed. So I would take my phone and I'd put the CES letter on my little phone and I'd like make it big because I'm getting old. And I would like read it at nighttime. And I read, it took me about 2 days and I read the whole thing. And I was like, well, I'm like, that's shocking. And I don't know if I was kind of numb, just like, wow, that's amazing. And I feel stupid and I feel hurt. And I was trying to figure out how I felt. But ultimately, I think with the biggest thing, I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed by the church, something that I had been given and taught from the moment I was born, something I lived every day of my life, something I formed every decision that I ever made around, a whole lifestyle around, that those kind of things were kept from those things that they knew that there was so much. They were in the gospel topic essays. They were in there, and they would like let a little bit of it out onto their websites when they felt like they needed to get it out there to pretend they weren't hiding it. And I just felt betrayed that they would do that. That they would keep these things. Keep these things from us and let us build all this stuff and let us revere someone like Joseph Smith and hide all the things that he did and all that he was from us and make songs and have us practically worship him and that we were always told never to look anywhere else because that's Satan's plan and that's following Satan. And I felt hurt and betrayed. And I said, all right. And that day, as soon as I finished reading it, I took my garments off and I said, forget it. I'm not doing this anymore. And I did have a lot of follow-up because the kids, I was very worried about them. I didn't know how or what or where it was going to go, but I was very worried about that. But I couldn't just live that anymore. But I just like, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And, we did. Mason, I already know this about Dad. When Mason was having his little crisis, and then we went to Arctic Circle, and that's why I told them, I'm like, I don't want to like give away what Dad and I are thinking at this very moment, but you need to talk to Dad because, yeah. And I talked with Ashley before this, and she had known, and and with Ashley, I never told her the reasons. I just told her that we had just found some stuff out, and kind of we were working things out, and she was super sweet, and she trusted us, and I told her she can have her own path, and she can do that, and we all still loved each other, and we were just getting through and stuff. But that's where it started. That's when we both decided that we were leaving.
And it doesn't come without a significant price.
Oh yeah.
So I sent Britton the CES letter shortly after I sent it to Heather. And I said, Britton, no matter what you choose, I will respect you, but I want you to know I'm leaving the church. And Britton took his time to read it. And when he got back to me in July, he said, Dad, I want you to know I don't believe it. I said, that's okay, Britton. I understand.
He doesn't believe what?
What I took it as the CES letter, that he still was going to believe the church. And I said, that's okay, Britton. I understand, I pushed through and just believed so many things for years. And he goes, no, Dad, I don't believe any of this shit. I'm done. I was like, what? And I was blown away. And like, what? And we shared it with his nephew. And I'll respect some boundaries there. But Britton then tells me quickly thereafter, hey, by the way, I've removed my name for the records of the church. I'm putting my name.
Quick. You made a decision.
I'm removing my name from the records of the church this week. I said, oh, hell no, you're not beating me to this. So we went through and did the Quit Mormon, Kirtland McConkie submission type thing. I submitted parallel with my bishop. And my bishop actually
Because that's the fastest way.
It is. Through the bishop's the fastest. Yeah. There was but I will tell you, having it notarized through a legal firm gets it really expedited fast. So my name was off the records really quick. I've removed my names, and Britton and I have kind of celebrated that out. And I tell you, that was kind of an interesting journey. It is tough to go through those, the whole cycle, because you go through, let me step back. The most humbling experience I've ever had in my life, John, was waking up and realizing at the age of 46, I was wrong, dead wrong. My entire world and religious view was wrong, because everything about my life I viewed through the Mormon lens, everything. And when I came crashing down, I realized, like Jerry Johnson told me, one of the most freeing things was, I'm not special anymore. And this is what I want to get to too. Yeah, I may have been a commanding officer of a nuclear submarine. Who cares? Someday I'm taking the uniform off. Yeah, I may have X degrees or whatever. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, all that matters is how I treat people, how I love people. What kind of a person I am in this world. Do I make the world a better place? Do I make people want to be better human beings? And if I can't do that, then I'm a failure. That's what failure is to me in life. And Jerry Johnson told me, he goes, Kelly, the day I left the church, all of a sudden I looked at my neighbors and said, ooh, they've got stories. I'm not better than them. And it was a big epiphany to me too. And all of a sudden, I started to listen more. I started to realize some of my other views were wrong. And I've went and questioned every view I've had. And it has been healing. It's been maddening. It's been angering. It's been frustrating. And there was a period of time in this last year, a couple months, I was in a very angry state. Not about the healing process, but as I dove deep reading all the kinds of sources of the Mormon Church. One of my favorite podcasts, I listen to every episode, Bryce Blankenship, Naked Mormonism. And yeah, he's a little vulgar at first, but his series, The Road to Carthage, love that. Thank you, Blake. Bryce, if you ever hear this, you meant a lot to me there. Your podcast.
We'll have that. Kara's adding that to the show notes as we speak.
Lindsay Hansen Parks, Your Polygamy. Oh my gosh, what those women went through. And knowing that she started that as a faithful Mormon, and it finally got to the point she realized, I'm done. The moving of the goalposts, constantly moving the goalposts, the church does throughout the years. Blacks in the priesthood, every social change, the church never catches up. And so many members, well, just wait, further light and knowledge is coming. Well, yeah, No kidding. I guarantee you in 10 years, we're going to have a revelation. Gays can be married in the church. Yeah, of course. Why? Because it comes down to finances. But I'm not going to wait for some social change in some church. If it really was the church of God and they were prophets, seers, and revelators, they sure as hell would have been prophet, seering, and revelating about this stuff early on. They wouldn't have been against Proposition 8. They wouldn't have been against black
Or
supremacy.
Proposition 8.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. They wouldn't have been against the ERA, which blew my mind. That's something I'd love you to touch on. They wouldn't have been against, the list goes on and on.
Civil rights movement.
Yes. They wouldn't have been so harsh on the gays and doing some of the stuff they did in the BYU in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the electroshock therapy and justification. They wouldn't have been against it. They would have actually led it, and God would have told them, inspired them. But it's not the case. And in fact, since Joseph Smith, realistically, what revelations have we got that have been really monumental?
Just undoing things.
Yes.
Rolling back polygamy.
Yes.
Rolling back the priesthood ban.
Yes.
It's been unrevelations, not revelations.
I'm sorry. That was very disrespectful. 2-hour church. That was monumental.
Wait, the logo. Forget the logo.
Oh, the logo.
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah,
Carol,
no.
stop me.
No, I'm being
off brand.
sarcastic.
I'm off brand.
I will
Carol.
see.
What have I done to you?
Yeah, no, but it was, but that is part of the healing process and going through that. But I'll tell you, I'm coming out of the angry stage now, and it's beautiful, it's awesome, it's exciting to experience life, and it's exciting to experience friends outside of the church, friends that left with us. In Silverdale, we have this ex-Mormon group that is amazing.
We got to hang with them last week.
We so loved having you up with us, John. It's healing to talk about. It's therapy. It was what it is.
What's it meant to have 4 other couples, some of them former high-level church leaders in the area? What's it like to have a little pod of close friends that you can hang out with, talk to, explore a little bit with, etc.?
There's really not the greatest words I can put, but this whole thing it's been amazing and liberating, but it's been hard, and it's been a struggle because our life has been Mormonism and stuff. But to have these friends and to have these people that we can have a bad day and we can tell them about, and we can in our text or whatever and say, this happened to me, and just get their views and their thoughts or their love is really all it takes, and the understanding to be able to go and to have fun and to say what you think and to be your true self and to with them has been the most healing and amazing thing, and I love them all, and I'm so grateful for them.
And the ironic thing is we were all in the same ward at one point. Oh yeah, so there.
We're gonna have a Bremerton rescue. There's
Yes.
been the Swedish rescue. There's been the Boise rescue. I'm calling it. There's going to be a Bremerton rescue.
Well, and there's a lot in the stake that have left. It's double digits.
Yeah.
And I won't mention names. We'll protect people. Because there's a lot of people in their boundaries. There's a lot of people that aren't ready for that. But I would love for you to talk about what were your shelf items.
Oh, there are a lot of things that made me very, very frustrated. Polyandry was a huge one. Why did he have to marry other people's wives? What was even the purpose of that? And then the misogyny that I've seen in the church. As I lived in it, I didn't notice it as much. I'd have to say Kelly has always been really awesome to me. He probably believes in me more than I ever believed in myself. So I didn't feel ever like he was like being domineering to me and stuff. But as I have left and the things I have read and things like that, and as my daughter has gotten older, I kind of view it through her eyes and her going through the things of the church and that, and I see it more like that, and that one kind of makes me a lot angry, and that these men are the ones who get to say if we're worthy or not, and that they get to have that power over us, and I don't really appreciate it. But I guess they're all of it. It's just I just feel betrayed and angry that they kept that all from us, and here we are trying to pick up the pieces, and in essence it does. Like I said, my family is awesome and amazing, and I know that this has hurt them because of I know I was where they were at, and I'm sure, and they don't understand, and I am not somebody who I feel like I have to throw at them everything that I've read if they're not ready to hear those kind of things. But a big thing about leaving that I have observed that has really been frustrating is some different experiences that I've had, and where people maybe that I have trusted to just understand, who know who I am, people that love me, and I'm like, they know who I am. They'll know that I wouldn't have made this choice lightly, that I would have had my reasons, that I would have done this. They haven't. And they have used the church to view me as maybe less apt to be a good parent, or less, or that maybe the fact we were talking last night with some friends and saying how being viewed as like Satan has led us astray, and now we're under the influence of Satan. And so all of this is just pretty much saying that I don't have my own will, that I am influenced, that I'm being led around by a string. And that just makes me angry every time I hear that I'm insulted that people would think that of me, especially people I loved. So.
Yeah. This, without mentioning the specific names, this group that we're part of, those friends, people need people. And the fact of the matter is nobody gets through this life alone. To have your concerns, your life validated in what you've been through means everything. And that is very healing for us. And since we have left, the number of people that have reached out to us, we could show you dozens of texts.
There's going to be a few
messages.
more, by the way.
Thank you. Well,
after this, I'm saying.
We just before we came here, getting on the plane, we posted that we're coming back here for Mormon Stories, and I was surprised
on Instagram and Facebook.
Oh wow! And
I
so it's definitely out there. I don't know if people always realize what Mormon Stories are. But I've even had midshipmen reach out that aren't LDS saying, "Oh, I love Mormon Stories." One particularly, like, I didn't know you followed Mormon Stories, but. There's going to be a lot of people that will not understand. And there's a lot of people that will just judge us and not want to understand because of that fear. And I realized that because when I was Mormon, my entire identity was the church. Above my military position, above my education, above everything else, it was the Mormon church. And so to walk away from that, or when you offer, let me step back, to offer the LDS faith to somebody and they turn you away, to me, they were rejecting me. They're not rejecting my faith, they reject me. And so I understand why people fear that when we walk away from the church, they feel like we're turning them away. But that's not the case. I emphatically state, I understand the Zealot Mormons. I was one. But I was where they are. They have not been where I'm at. So I allow them the freedom and the latitude as they preach in their 11th article of faith to worship how, where, or what they may. I just request the same in return. I also want them to know, yes, I'm happy. I'm happy without a glossy perfectionism. And I'm actually more free to talk about realistic problems and things in life.
One more thing I want to just mention, especially going through this and the hard parts of leaving a whole life thing and a whole about your family and stuff is, I didn't know how to put it into words, but I was looking at Instagram. It was back in December, and the post-Mormon hug is what I was looking at, and they had this post on here, and it kind of said it for me. She says, she said, on a related note, watching your parents grieve, basically the loss of your salvation, is incredibly painful and uncomfortable. Sometimes I just want to scream at how my spiritual identity deeply affects others. It makes me realize that it really shouldn't, because at the end of the day, the tears are manifestations of fear. Fear for my ultimate salvation, fear of a fiery hell or a lesser degree of glory as a consequence. It makes me wonder why I ever believed in something like that. And that is what is frustrating to me, is that I'm happy. I am grateful. I have my family. I know where I'm at. I chose this not on a whim or not because Satan led me away. I chose this because I know these things now. I know these truths, and I am not going to put myself in a box and of something that isn't true. And my spiritual identity is mine, and I'm grateful for it. But I know how people in the church family members view it now, and they are mourning the loss. They are grieving for my salvation, and it's maddening to think like I'm not grieving for my salvation. I don't believe that. That is not a construct I have anymore. But yet I have to go through their grief for me, which is unwarranted, and it hurts. And then the little thing on this, it says, the intense discomfort of watching your loved ones writhe in the tragedy of your apostasy will ease in time. And it's a little thing that I saved and I read periodically, like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
They'll get over it. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I guess they will, or I'll learn to just be me, and it doesn't matter. And I can live my own life, and I'm happy with who I am.
Yeah. And that's the end of it is we have this life. Whether there's a life after or not, who knows? Some people think they know. Whether there is or not, I'm going to value this life. And instead of living for some fantasy life afterwards in this celestial kingdom where you get to populate mass worlds, I'm sorry, you don't get the world anymore, that you get to do I don't know what now. I'm not going to live a life of hope for this world that is supposed to be better. I'm going to live this life now in this world that is actually awesome and make it better. And just love everybody of every religion, of every creed, of every color, of every sexual orientation, of every kind.
Gender identity.
And
every gender identity. And whatever else we learn in the future that will help us be better humans. Because in the end of it, a lot of people think that when we left the church, we left the divinity of what was next. But I'll tell you, in leaving, and I starting to see humans and the humanity, and seeing the true humanity that's out there, I see the divinity. And that's what makes me happy. It gives me faith and hope.
And as a bonus, your sons are still alive. I guess that's not bad, right? You get to keep your sons in this life.
Awesome. Amazing.
Is that a bonus?
I'm
Yes.
pretty grateful for that.
Because the story could have been so much different.
Absolutely.
And not only do we have our sons, we have our daughter, and we have all our kids. Despite the fact that some are in and some are out, we all are together, and we're strong, and we're tight. And despite the failings as parents, and I recognize that, and I'm working through my own failings with my sons, and I'm grateful that they have the courage to even speak up about that at this age. We're getting better and better. Isn't that the goal of every generation?
This life is a journey and a process.
And one hell of a journey.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to ask your sons to go squinch and sit next to you in the chairs while I'm just going to monologue for just 1 second. I'm just going to say this, that, some people get frustrated at ex-Mormons, post-Mormons, and how they have to talk out and how we can't shut up and how we are angry and how we're all over Reddit and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. But the deal is that, there have been surveys done. 5 to 20% of LGBT of Mormon youth now identify as LGBTQ, and so this LGBTQ issue, some of you on Mormon Stories might be sick of it. Number one, you should care about all humans, and that's important. But there are still lots of people still in the church, lots of parents that aren't as accepting and as loving as the Laing family, and there are just lots of kids that are still wondering whether they want to stay alive. And just frankly, there's still monthly LGBTQ suicides in Utah and amongst the Mormons. So this problem has not gone away in 2021. And, this problem is as big of a problem as it's ever been. And so why do we keep talking about this LGBTQ? And by the way, even if you don't have empathy, post-Mormons, for the LGBTQ experience, and some of you don't, this should speak volumes to you about the Mormon Church's claim to have prophetic mantle, to have inspiration, to be led by God. Or if you're a Christian, Christ said to leave the 99 and go after the one. If you still are Christian in some way or another, you should be wondering why God's one true church, led by prophets, is leaving 5 to 20% of its youth on the ledges of potential death by suicide and or dying by suicide. so that they can wallow in the comforts of their $200 billion in stock reserves and their privilege of being white, straight, heterosexual, cisgender Mormons. Like, there's nothing Christ-like about leaving the LGBTQ people to suffer, literally suffer, bleed, and die so that you can maintain your comforts as a privileged, East Bench Utah Mormon. Like, this should trouble you no matter where you stand or sit on the spectrum. So we've got this beautiful family here, scooched that way just a tiny bit. And, want to make sure you guys talk into the microphone. But as we're kind of closing out this episode with this beautiful family, what are any final, Britton or Mason, any final thoughts you want to share? Make sure you talk into the mic. And what closing thoughts do we have for everyone?
I just have two things I wanted to share. One is...
Hold that mic close.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure. I have two things I really want to share. One
Go as
is...
close as you can. I know it's obnoxious.
That's about
One, it's... For me, when I left, when I finally decided to go, I was kind of by myself in a sense. I wasn't with my family. Like I was with family. I wasn't surrounded by like-minded people in that sense. And so for me, you're giving up a lot of your coping mechanisms. You're like, oh, I sing a hymn, or go to do these things to feel okay. And what really helped me was actually something that you, John, and Natasha Helfer put on together. It was a Thrive retreat. If you go search on YouTube, Thrive, Thriving Beyond Mormonism, they have a channel. And that Thrive retreat, it's like 20 hours of free therapy. Honestly, like I've watched it 3 times because it is so powerful to me and helping me. Like, it's not about like the church. It's not about like what the church messed up. It's about, okay, now if you're leaving, you're thinking about leaving, here's how you handle leaving and how to be healthy and be a mentally healthy person, emotionally healthy in your relationships and parenting and sexual health. And it was such a blessing to me. And I cherish those videos. So I would look there if you can. I'm sure we'll post it in the,
well, sure. And I'll just say thanks to Clint and Jenny Martin that literally went to one of these retreats and said, this is so powerful. We want to pay you and Natasha and an entire video crew to film an entire weekend's retreat. And so it was me and Margie and Natasha. Thanks to Clint and Jenny Martin, we called it the Thrive Retreat. Happened right before COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And we recorded a free 2.5-day retreat. And all the participants were willing to be recorded and share their experiences. And it's one of the most important things I think we've ever done and one of the least known things out there. But you can just Google Mormon Stories Thrive Retreat and you can watch that whole weekend. And I sometimes am like, why? I think that was a great event. Why didn't it matter to anybody? And I guess what you're saying is it mattered to you guys.
To all of us.
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah, it was so powerful.
Thank you to Natasha. I know you're not here, but you literally saved lives.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I go my second thing real quick, if that's okay. And this is my last thing. It's just, my mom kind of touched on it and my dad too. It's
lean forward a bit.
Yeah, it's just the fact that now I can live my life, and I don't want to live my life happy, because I think it's an interesting topic of like pursuing happiness. But I am so excited that I can live and be human and experience all the range of emotions, the sadness, the pains, the mess ups, the times I get up. And I think that's the beauty of, for me, in leaving the church, is that now I can be human, and that's okay, and not feel guilt or shame about it.
I love it.
Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, actually, just like the world isn't black and white, like everything in the world isn't, like my mom was saying, you can't put people in a box, and you can't, just because someone does one thing bad doesn't mean they're bad, or one thing good doesn't mean make them good. Everyone is a human, and they're working and they're growing, and just like, don't take things at face value. Like, especially with like ex-Mormons and everything, like listen and learn about what we go through.
Thank you.
I will second Britton's recommendation. He called me. It's like, you have to listen to this. And so I listened to it. And
to the retreat?
The Thrive Retreat. And it was amazing. And there was actually, my favorite part was a line by Margie. She had talked about Buddhism and how in Buddhism, one of their things is life is suffering. And I remember at face value, I'm like, whoa, life is suffering. I don't like to suffer. But then she explained it more. And I love that principle. And I've actually used that so much in my life since then, is that our life is full of suffering, but it's also full of happy. And the parts where you're sad or you're suffering or they're not good, they're not your fault. And it's just part of life. Things happen. Things good happen. Things bad happen. That's how it is.
Personal.
No, and you roll with it. And I think in the church that I definitely felt that
It's always you.
Yeah, it's always me. I'm not being righteous enough, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that. And any amount, and if I am suffering, then I need to do something better to change that. And so that principle to me, of just to look at the world in that way has helped so much, and I'm grateful for that.
I guess from my side of the house, the last thing that I would say are a couple points. Number one, I used to tell people all the time, I did not leave the church. We did not leave the church because our 2 sons are gay. We left because we found out that the foundation of everything it's built upon, it's been whitewashed history. It's been a lie. There's too much out there that proves that the church is not true. It's not what it claims to be. There is still a lot of good that comes from the church, and we recognize that for the members that want to stay. But what we ask for is to understand that we didn't leave because we wanted to go sin. Far from it. I mean, the pain and the turmoil you go through when you actually leave an entire social and religious construct is nothing I would wish upon anybody. But when you take that pill, and bringing it back to the Matrix, and you realize what you actually are living in, no matter what pain you're going to go through, you want truth, and truth is what matters most. But with that, for those that go through this process, understand it is painful, it is hard, it is not easy, as all of the ex-Mormons do. But at the end, we have a choice. Once we go through that burning and that fire and everything gets burnt to the ground, do we sit there and wallow in the ashes? Or are we going to plant something new? Are we going to pick ourselves up, dust off? Or are we going to get moving on? And that's what we choose to do. We're not going to stay bitter. We're going to get better and better and better. And that's my challenge to all those out there. Even the Mormons, the active LDS that stay in. Get better. Love better. Be the Steve Hawes of the world. The stake president that flew cross country to have dinner with me, just to listen. Be that kind of Mormon. Because I tell you, if every Mormon or member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was like that man, the church would not have the faith crisis it's going through right now. Lastly, thank you. Thank you to you, John. Thank you to Margie. Thank you, Kara. Thank you to everyone else that made the journey to go through this. Thank you to my brother that went through and was my therapist along the way. Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, Joe. And he's been listening to me the entire time. Thank you to our friend group up in Silverdale. And
thanks, Julie and Jerry.
Yes.
Love you guys. Whole Johnson family.
And thank you to one individual whose name starts with a T, and I won't mention his full name because he's in his process of leaving right now. But we spent the other morning until 4 a.m. sitting in a hot tub talking about all this. And I love this guy like none other. Thank you to the friends that are making it easier. Because though we are not paying for professional therapists right now, these friend therapists mean a lot.
I think I know that guy.
Yes, I think you do. You did meet him.
Beautiful. Well, Kara, what do you think?
Oh, I was just posting on Instagram about how much I love you guys. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm pretty much speechless start to end. And I am incredibly impressed with everything that you've just taken and funneled this all into like such positive words there at the end, even when obviously your sons and your whole family had to sacrifice so much for your, not just your military service, but your church service and your dedication and stuff. And so anyway, I'm just really inspired, and I'll shut up now because this was the greatest podcast ever. I can't add anything else to it. Back to you, John.
All right. Well, thanks so much to all of you. Kelly and Heather and Mason and Britton, you guys are so inspiring. I've been looking forward. We've been talking about this for months, right?
We have, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's so great to finally have it happen. We're 9.25 hours into the stream.
I did not expect that.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been amazing. Huge thanks again to Jerry and Julie Johnson, our dear friends, for helping make this connection.
Yes.
And to all the friends, I do want to encourage everyone to find your pod. Like Margie and I have found some friends here in Salt Lake that have, and even some friends outside of Salt Lake that have been really meaningful to us. And I do want to just say that your group in Bremerton inspires us. You've shown your photos on Ex-Mormon Reddit, and other people have been inspired. But one thing is, if you can just work hard to find a Mormon Spectrum group, go to mormonspectrum.org, go to Facebook, go to Ex-Mormon Reddit, wherever you need to, a Thrive group. You know, one of the things we want to focus on over the next coming years is helping people find ex-Mormons in your local area, wherever you live.
Yes.
UK, Brazil, Mexico, Utah, Texas, DC, wherever it is. You know, reach out to us help you find your little pod, because having a little group of 4 or 5 couples to help navigate this with can make all the difference. So that's one public service message that I'm going to kind of end with. But you guys are beautiful. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your story. It's so inspiring. And just keep shining that beautiful light. And really, Britton and Mason, I just always love it when teens or young adults are willing to come on Mormon Stories, and just it's so powerful. So you guys are awesome.
Thank you, John. We love you. And we owe you the world. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Mason and Britton, you guys keep doing beautiful things and come back and give us updates.
Interview me in 3 years.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much. Again, Kara, thanks so much for being our sidekick, being my co-host, I should say.
Yeah, we got to wrap this up because I have to go jump into this hug over here.
Okay.
Just I'm waiting.
Yeah, and just thanks to all the Mormon Stories listeners. If you donate, thank you for making all this possible. You make Kara possible.
Thank you.
You make Gerardo possible. You make Brooklyn possible. You make me possible. You make this cinematography possible, this studio. If you don't support us, we lose 10 to 20 donors a month. And if we don't replace them, then we have to get rid of Kara or me or Gerardo or Brooklyn or these facilities.
I actually go back into the matrix. Can't afford me.
So please step up and support us if you value this. Become a financial contributor. Go to mormonstories.org. Become a donor. Share this. Follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, wherever we have the socials. Please follow us. Please subscribe. Please share this episode and others with everybody else. And we'll turn the whole world big, bright, and enlightened over time. And whether you stay in or out of the church, we don't care. We just want informed consent. And we want less LGBTQ youth suffering. We want less depression, less anxiety, less split families, less unnecessary divorces, less fractured families. And so for all that, please support Mormon Stories. Please support the Open Stories Foundation. And most importantly, just love each other and keep being good to each other. And let's all live big, bright, beautiful lives. So let's have one last shot of this beautiful Laing family. You guys want to wave to the camera? Yeah?
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I'm going to take one quick last photo of you. Smile for candid camera. And we'll see you guys all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast.
Thank you, John.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Kara.
Thanks, Kara. Thanks, Laing family. Love you, Margie.
We love you, Margie.
All right.